Hey, second graders, it's time for chapter 10 of Sideways Stories from Wayside School. Today we're going to read about Paul. Uh-oh, Paul maybe doesn't look so nice. Let's see. Paul had the best seat in Mrs. Jules's class. He sat in the back of the room. It was this seat that was the furthest away from Mrs. Jules. Mrs. Jules was teaching the class about fractions. She drew a picture of a pie on the blackboard. She cut the pie into 8 pieces. She explained that each pie was 1/8 of a pie, that each piece was 1/8 of a pie. Paul never paid attention. He didn't see the picture of the pie. He didn't see anything. Well, he did see one thing. Actually, he saw two things. He saw Leslie's pigtails. Leslie sat in front of Paul. She had two long brown pigtails that reached all the way down to her waist. Paul saw those pigtails, and a terrible urge came over him. He wanted to pull a pigtail. He wanted to wrap his fist around it, feel the hair between his fingers, and just yank. He thought it would be so fun to tie pigtails together, or better yet, tie them to her chair. But most of all, he just wanted to pull one. Slowly, he reached for the right one. No, what am I doing? He thought. I'll only get into trouble. Paul, Paul had it made. He sat in the back of the room. He paid no attention to anyone, and nobody paid any attention to him. If he pulled a pigtail, it would be all over. Leslie would tell on him, and he'd become the center of attention. He sighed and slowly withdrew his arm, but Paul couldn't ignore the pigtails. There they were, dangling right in front of him, just begging to be pulled. He could close his eyes, but he couldn't make her pigtails disappear. And he could still smell them, and hear them, and he could almost taste them. Maybe just a little tug, he thought. No, none. Then there they hung, easily within reach. Well, let them just hang there, thought Paul. It would be foolish to pull one, no matter how tempting it was. None of the children in the class pulled pigtails. Why should he? Of course, none of the other children sat behind Leslie either. It was just a simple matter of being able to think clearly. That was all. Paul thought it over and decided not to pull one. It was simple. It was as simple as that. Suddenly, his arm shot forward. He grabbed Leslie's right pigtail and yanked. Yeah! Screamed Leslie. Everyone looked at her. Paul just pulled my pigtail, she said. They all looked at Paul. I couldn't help it, said Paul. You'd better learn to, said Mrs. Jules. She wrote Paul's name on the blackboard under discipline. Tell Leslie you're sorry. I'm sorry, Leslie, said Paul. Said Leslie. Paul felt horrible. Never again would he pull another pigtail. Except there was one problem. He still wasn't satisfied. He had pulled the right one, but that wasn't enough. He wanted to pull the left one, too. It was as if he heard a little voice coming from the pigtail saying, Pull me, Paul, pull me. I can't, Paul answered. My name's already on the blackboard under the word discipline. Big deal, said the pigtail. Pull me. No way, said Paul. Never again. Aw, come on, Paul. Just a little tug, urged the pigtail. What harm could it do? Lots of harm, said Paul. Leslie'll scream and I'll get in trouble again. Boy, that's not fair, whined the pigtail. You pulled the right one, now it's my turn. I know, but I can't, said Paul. Sure you can, said the pigtail. Just grab me and yank. No, said Paul. It's not right. Sure it is, Paul, said the pigtail. Pigtails are meant to be pulled. That's what we're here for. Tell that to Leslie, said Paul. Leslie won't mind, said the pigtail. I promise. I bet, said Paul. Just like you didn't mind the last time. You just didn't pull hard enough, said the pigtail. Leslie likes it to be really hard. Really? asked Paul. Cross my heart, said the pigtail. The harder the better. Okay, said Paul. But if you're lying, I promise, said the pigtail. Paul grabbed the left pigtail. It felt good in his hand, and he pulled as hard as he could. Ow! Leslie screamed. Mrs. Jules asked Paul, why did you pull Leslie's pigtail again. No, said Paul. I pulled the other one. All the children laughed. Are you trying to be funny? Asked Mrs. Jules. No, said Paul. I was trying to be fair. I couldn't pull one and not the other. The children laughed again. Pigtails are not meant to be pulled, Paul concluded. Mrs. Jules put a check next to Paul's name on the blackboard under discipline. But at last Paul was satisfied. True to his name, True, his name was on the blackboard with a check next to it, but it really didn't matter. All he had to do was stay out of trouble for the rest of the day, and his name would be erased. It's easy to stay out of trouble when you have the best seat in the class. In fact, Paul could do this every day. He could pull Leslie's right pigtails twice, and then stay out of trouble for the rest of the day. There was nothing Leslie could do about it. Suddenly, out of nowhere, Leslie screamed, "Rah!" Mrs. Jules circled Paul's name and sent him home early on the kindergarten bus. Nobody would believe that he hadn't pulled Leslie's pigtail again. If he didn't do it, who did it? Was it another kid? I don't know. What do you think? Tomorrow we are going to read about Dana. All right, I'll see you then.